USAID is a worthless institution that should be destroyed. The United States Agency for International Development, USAID. You know, there's a lot of frustration here because USAID was created by John F. Kennedy by executive order. So let me give you the backstory on this one. Congress in 1961, Congress authorized the creation of an entity through which to process foreign economic aid. John F. Kennedy, by executive order, created USAID, USAID. Congress never authorized USAID. For purposes of this conversation, to keep it easy, I'm going to refer to it as USAID because USAID, foreign aid, it gets confusing, USAID. Congress never actually authorized or created USAID. It was an executive order. Congress just created an entity through which to process those foreign dollars. Donald Trump is now ending USAID and sending it to the State Department. It's a good thing. My buddy Chip Roy, congressman, has a thread on Twitter of USAID grants. Here's the problem. For every legitimate purpose that USAID has that can be done by other existing governmental agencies, USAID spends a lot of additional money on far left programs. In fact, USAID is one of the largest subsidizing institutions for non-governmental organizations. Part of the illegal immigration crisis we have in this country is funded by non-governmental organizations or NGOs that are in turn funded by USAID. Let me read you some of the things that USAID funds. These are all real and legitimate things. In 2024, USAID gave $1,999,900 to Asociación Lambda in Guatemala to strengthen trans-led organizations to deliver gender-affirming health care. They spent $40 billion to give $45 million in DEI scholarships to Burma, $520 million for consultant-driven ESG investments in Africa, $1.2 billion in awards to undisclosed recipients for left-wing purposes. They awarded $969,821 to Stephen Leonelli of Washington, D.C. for supporting, quote, development, democracy, and innovation inclusive development hub programs, protecting the human rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex individuals. They spent $400,000 in Honduras to contribute to the gradual and sustained reduction of the historical exclusion of Honduran youth from public debate and decision-making on issues that affect the recognition, respect, and full enjoyment of their rights. The activity will focus its efforts on accompanying social actors, especially youth, in actions that promote and enhance constructive dialogue with social oversight and advocacy towards the legislative work of the National Congress and its internal structures. In other words, getting LGBTIAQ individuals who are youth involved in government. But wait, there's more. USAID awarded $1,499,999 to Grupo Izagi. The activity aims to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities by promoting economic empowerment of and opportunity for LGBTQI+ people in Serbia. It will foster an environment that increases employment potential for LGBTQI+ persons, expands opportunities for LGBTQI+ entrepreneurs, and reduce workplace discrimination in Serbia. USAID failed to ensure Palestinian aid dollars were kept from terrorists, a federal watchdog says. The aid agency downplayed the report as the Biden administration started giving more money to the Palestinians. USAID handed hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to the Palestinians, and a chunk of it directly funded Hamas's terrorism. This is from the State Department. Political extremism has permeated the aid bureaucracy at USAID. An entire edifice of racial, sexual, and gender ideological requirements have been imposed. DEI committees have been established in all bureaus, offices, and overseas missions. USAID has created an agency-wide dashboard and DEI scorecard for all bureaus, offices, and missions to track staff compliance with the administration's DEI directives. The State Department has expended $77 million over the past 2 years to build its DEI platforms, and it plans to expend another $83 million this year. Representative Mike McCall, Republican of Texas, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, recently described how DEI is enforced, and he said, quote, "Now, foreign and civil service officers must pledge allegiance to the DEI agenda or risk never being promoted within USAID. An example of the radicalization of our aid is USAID's $45 million 5-year program to promote human rights, social justice, democracy, and inclusive development around the world, based on the social movement theories of an Italian Marxist professor. Far from defending overseas democracies, this and other such programs undermine it, giving sustenance to anti-American forces that would otherwise wither on the vine for lack of domestic support. Our government's democracy promotion programs that once advocated for natural-based rights, election integrity, civil society, independent media, and economic freedom have become disfigured to support a global network of left-wing NGOs that seek to undermine U.S. interests and adopt positions espoused by our adversaries and include support for a terrorist group, Hamas. USAID and the National Institutes of Health gave $439,999 to promote transgender and gender minority adults, funded through the University of Nebraska. USAID is at this point an illegitimate organization that needs to be shut down. There are legitimate things that USAID has done. USAID has supported agriculture initiatives in Africa to teach farmers in drought-stricken areas to farm more efficiently in areas with reduced water and help them grow crops that are more drought-tolerant so that we are not sending them food constantly, but rather they are learning to grow food themselves regardless of their weather situation. That's useful. It actually reduces the amount of money that we're sending them by teaching them to take care of themselves. It's a useful program that could be done through the Department of Agriculture, not through USAID. USAID has actually worked to fund democracy initiatives in countries that are coming out of tyranny, so that they know how to run voting locations with integrity and make sure that democratic votes happen. Those are useful programs that could be run through the Department of State. USAID actually funds a water program that is a phenomenal program. It is a water program in drought-stricken areas, particularly in Africa, that teaches water conservation, water harvesting, how to efficiently build wells, and also supplies some amazing technology advances that use machines that pull water from the humidity of the air and can actually produce water from that humidity for locals to drink and use for crops and other things. It's actually remarkably useful. It can be done through other governmental entities, because the majority of what USAID does is promote a left-wing agenda. USAID got captured by bureaucrats who are on the left, and they've refused to give up power. USAID has spent literally billions of taxpayer dollars to promote transgenderism around the world. They have spent billions of dollars to advocate for LGBTQIA plus initiatives around the world. Not democracy, not sustainability, none of that. You know, one of the big things they've done as well is in Africa and elsewhere, they have worked on climate change, scaring the bejesus out of African nations, depriving them of resources that could be used to fight mosquitoes and the like, to put them all under nets. It is the ultimate paternal colonialism of the West that instead of giving them pesticides to kill mosquitoes, we've just told them they got to bundle up under mosquito nets at night. USAID is an organization that does not need to exist. Congress has recognized its existence as the entity through which foreign aid dollars are controlled, spent, and managed. But it's actually created as an executive order. And Donald Trump has every right constitutionally to alter the structure of USAID. Today, its employees showed up at its office and found it was closed. A memo went out this weekend advising people not to show up at the office. Marco Rubio, as Secretary of State, has now been put in charge of it. He will begin consolidating the necessary pieces of USAID to move in-house. But here's what you have to understand. Donald Trump is not actually getting rid of the useful programs within USAID. Donald Trump is not getting rid of the programs that teach third world country farmers to farm because he recognizes that that means we will ultimately have to give them less money and less food when they learn to take care of themselves. Donald Trump is not ending programs that teach them how to dig wells efficiently and manage water resources because he understands they'll be able to take care of themselves and we won't have to spend as much money. What Donald Trump is doing, and this is where the outcry comes in, is he's ending the U.S. government's subsidization of the left-wing agenda through non-governmental organizations. That is the biggest role that USAID covers. It takes your federal tax dollars and distributes them to far-left progressive organizations around the world. And those far-left progressive organizations then fund an anti-U.S. agenda, an anti-Christian agenda, an anti-common sense agenda. USAID is responsible for the existence of a lot of left-wing NGOs around the world. It partners with a lot of left-wing groups, Soros and others, to advance progressivism around the world. And whether you're progressive or conservative doesn't matter. The government of the United States should not be picking an ideological side through the distribution of foreign aid, and it always and reliably funds left-wing causes at the expense of right-wing causes. It always funds secular institutions at the expense of Christian organizations. It always and forever corrupts. USAID is not needed. It is not wanted. It can go away, and it should be placed on the ash heap of history. It is not an institution the United States needs. It was one created by executive order, so it can be ended by executive order. If Congress ever really cared about it, they could have propped it up through the ratification of legislation, and they never did. All they did was to approve funding USAID as a recognized entity, but the president can change that recognition, and he's going to. And when you hear all the anger and rage in the media, understand it's not about the legitimate purposes of USAID. It's about the left is realizing its gravy train is coming to an end.